It is so nice to be here on National Poetry Day. Really enjoyed hearing Simon Armitage on the radio this morning reading a special poem, and it reminded me of when I saw Brian. Saw Simon, sorry, Brian, because we're joined by Brian Bilston and Kushi Dayani. Thank you, Kushi, for coming all the way from India virtually to be one of our readers. Brian, thank
No.
you so much for coming all the way from, I think, Manhattan. I think you must
Yes.
be in a loft in
Yeah.
Manhattan.
Yeah.
That's a very Brian Bilston lifestyle sort of
Mhm.
choice, I would say. But it reminds me when I met Simon Armitage in the tent at the Hay Festival. He was just queuing up to get a cup of tea with his wife, who I had met very briefly a few years before. I went up to Simon. I said, Simon, it's so nice to see you. Congratulations on becoming the poet laureate. And I turned to Simon's wife and I said, we met briefly a couple of years ago. So nice to see you. And Simon turned to me and said, that's not my wife. In fact, that was just a woman queuing behind him to get a cup of tea. There was nowhere to go with that. That was just deeply embarrassing. And I looked up and there was Simon's actual wife sitting on a sofa watching the two of us with an amused smile. So that's my Simon Armitage story. And now let's start with one of my absolute favorite poems. Kushi, I just want to sort of share with you the fact that in my studio I have a bust of William Blake, taken when he was still alive. It's not a death mask; it's a life mask, and it's a bust of William Blake. He looks down on me from my bookcase every day as I work. I look up and there's William looking down at me, and I sort of think of my absolute sort of favorite poem. So Kushi, if you would like to read my favorite William Blake poem, Tiger.
Absolutely. Yeah. The Tiger by William Blake. Tiger, tiger, burning bright, in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burn the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp? Dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright, in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry?
Kushi, thank you. I just I loved the way you read that. It felt sort of just absolutely appropriate. And my goodness, that sort of, I love the line about the sort of the hand that made the lamb made thee, I think. And I don't know, I think of sort of David Attenborough when I think of this poem. You know, a sort of wonderful, slightly mysterious poem in praise of nature in all its glory. And I'm now thinking of another sort of thing. There is my tiger in the forests of the night. And I also particularly like William Blake's spelling. It's one of my favorite spellings, tiger. Kushi, thank you. Now, next we have, just to change it up a little bit, it's still a bit of a nature poem, I feel. This is a poem by a friend of mine, the poet A.F. Harold. I'm proud to call A.F. A friend. He is the possessor, and I'm sure you'll agree, Brian, he's the possessor of one of the most magnificent literary beards currently to be seen, and it's large and ginger, and makes him look a little bit like Edward Lear, which I know will infuriate him because he is not a fan of Edward Lear. I am. I'm a huge fan of Edward Lear, so we try not to talk about that when we meet. This is a lovely poem. Brian is going to read this rather wonderful poem about cruelty to ducks, but with a literary theme. The last time I did an event with A.F. Harold was at the Sydney Writers' Festival, and he ended up, as I drew live in front of an audience, A.F. Harold ended up rolling around on the floor singing "I Wish I Was a Wallaby or Perhaps a Kangaroo." A performance only Brian Bilston, I think, could match for theatricality. Brian, this is A.F. Harold's poem, Troll Song.
Troll Song, okay. Although it's called Troll Song, I shall resist the urge to sing this to you this morning. Much to your relief, I'm sure. And it's really nice actually to have a poem written from the perspective of a troll, which has been a very sort of marginalized voice in contemporary poetry. So here we go, Troll Song. It wasn't always my ambition to live under a bridge. There came a point though where a decision had to be made. It was either here or in a swamp or a cave. On the plus side, there's cold running water all the time. On the minus side, I am living under a bridge. There's little privacy and less in the way of respect. It's only a small bridge. My feet stick out when I sleep. I bang my head more than I'd like. I get into arguments with ducks. People look down on me, living under a bridge. But it's a tradition, my mum said, and tradition's tradition. Sometimes I eat the ducks. Those are arguments I've won. On either riverbank are pastures, lush lands. I like the smell in spring of the 100 different flowers. I never mention this when other trolls come to visit. I read a lot of books. They contain other worlds. For a time, I can imagine I'm not living under a bridge. You can learn things in books too, important, useful things. I eat every goat I see these days, just to be on the safe side.
Brian, that was beautifully read, if not sung. I think you might have a career almost similar to William Shatner, the great Captain Kirk from the Starship Enterprise, who I remember did a beautiful spoken rendition of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Yes, I know that song.
Yeah, it's very, very beautiful. So that, again, another sort of maybe a career move, Brian. Spoken lyrics. I think Brian Bilston does the Beatles. It's even alliterative. Thank you so much. That was lovely. That's Troll Song by A.F. Harold. Now, the next poem from, and I'm now going to do a bit of product placement here, from Poems to Save the World With, chosen and illustrated by me, with a very, very shiny, satisfyingly shiny cover. And quite a few of these poems were written and chosen, I think, sort of for lockdown. I hate to sort of mention it this soon, but this next poem is a wonderful traditional poem, I suppose, and it's If by Kipling, Rudyard Kipling, and I love this poem for all sorts of ways. It's very traditional, but at the same time, you know, as I was thinking about it, I thought, well, there's something about the way this wonderful poem giving sort of advice on how to be a man, I sort of have always thought of it in the past as being sort of said in rather sort of, I don't know, sort of epic, in an epic voice, being sort of spoken by Rudyard himself to a young sort of schoolboy maybe, and then I started to think, well, actually, I would like to include this poem in Poems to Save the World With, but actually, the voice I think I sort of think would be appropriate to it is the voice of the mother talking to the son. And so I thought, right, that's the way I'm going to imagine it. Well, so the next poem is If by Rudyard Kipling, and Brian is going to read it, I think, in wonderful stentorian Kipling, in a Kipling way. But I want all of us to imagine it as advice from a mother to her son. Brian.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies. Or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
Brian, beautifully read. Thank you so much for that. That's lovely. Now, I think keeping on this sort of theme of sort of parental advice, this is a beautiful, touching poem that Kushi is going to read next. It's a poem which I love. It's by Raymond Antrobus, and Raymond is hearing impaired, and this is a very touching, rather sort of beautiful sort of reminiscence of time he spent being read to by his father, and it's a very particular picture book that features a parental bear and a baby bear. And it's a very sort of touching poem, I think, a reminiscence of Raymond's time being read to by his father, and it's called Happy Birthday Moon, and Kushi's going to read it to us now.
Happy Birthday Moon by Raymond Antrobus. Dad reads aloud. I follow his finger across the page. Sometimes his finger moves past words, tracing white space. He makes the moon say something new every night to his deaf son who slurs his speech. Sometimes his finger moves past words, tracing white space. Tonight he gives the moon my name, but I can't say it. His deaf son who slurs his speech. Dad taps the page, says try again. Tonight he gives the moon my name, but I can't say it. I say rain in Accabock. He laughs. Dad taps the page, says try again. But I like making him laugh. I say my mistake again. I say rain in Accabock. He laughs, says Raymond is something else. I like making him laugh. I say my mistake again. Rain in Accabock. What else will help us? He says Raymond is something else. I'd like to be the moon, the bear, even the rain. Rain in Accabock. What else will help us? Hear each other, really hear each other. I'd like to be the moon, the bear, even the rain. Dan makes the moon say something new every night, and we hear each other, really hear each other. As Dad reads aloud, I follow his finger across the page.
Thank you. That's so lovely, and I love the refrain of how father and son really hear each other, and it's an experience I think we've all had. I think with reading books. I think with children, it's that sort of sense of the communication you can sort of have as you. And I'm going to turn my machine back on, and hopefully I will appear again. We're pausing slightly. I can see both Brian and Cushy looking at me from a distance, wondering what's happening. It's just, I've turned my machine back on. I'm just going to see whether I can start my video. And here I am now. I'm going to see whether I can. William, can you come here? This is my technical support. This is going to come in and help. Can you put my camera back on? It's quite nice being able to see you just for a little bit, and as opposed to my disembodied hand. It's a sort of a nice sort of thing. Now I think I'm going to go back to being a hand. Here we are. I'm back. So I don't think it's a proper Zoom event without one of these little sort of, hitches, is it? And I see Cushy looking at me all the way from India with no hitch at all. It's just wonderfully heartwarming. Although someone very interesting just walked behind you, Cushy, as we began. I wondered who that was.
Oh yeah, that's my elder sister.
Oh, lovely. Oh, fantastic. Is she listening from just the next room?
No, I told her not to disturb me.
Good. Okay. We don't want to be
Just
disturbed.
wandering around.
We don't want to be disturbed. Just like Raymond and his father and Happy Birthday Moon, a very touching, rather lovely sort of bedtime story of a poem. And I heard Raymond read this at the Foyle Young Poets event. And I came across Cushy's work at the Foyle Young Poets, which is a wonderful, wonderful prize. And Cushy wrote a very beautiful poem, which we're going to hear in a little later. But now, the next poem we have for you is a wonderful, wonderful poem. And it's about a daughter and a mother, as opposed to a father and a son. This is a daughter and a mother. And it's a daughter thinking about the role her mother has had on her life. It's called The Raincoat. Cushy, you're going to read it for us.
The Raincoat by Ada Raymond. When the doctor suggested surgery and a brace for all my youngest years, my parents scrambled to take me to massage therapy, deep tissue work, osteopathy, and soon my crooked spine unspooled a bit. I could breathe again and move more in a body unclouded by pain. My mom would tell me to sing songs to her the whole 45 minutes drive to Middletown Rock Road and 45 minutes back from physical therapy. She'd say that even my voice sounded unfettered by my spine afterward. So I sang and sang because I thought she liked it. I never asked her what she gave up to drive me or how her day was before this chore. Today, at her age, I was driving myself home from yet another spine appointment, singing along to some maudlin but solid song on the radio. And I saw a mom take her raincoat off and give it to her young daughter when a storm took over the afternoon. My God, I thought. My whole life I've been under her raincoat, thinking it was somehow a marvel that I never got wet.
That last line, Cushy, is just so beautiful, isn't it? My whole life I've been under her raincoat, thinking that it's a marble that I haven't got wet. It's beautiful, isn't it? It's absolutely the way we take, and I speak as a parent, the way that our children take us for granted. It's shocking. Mm. Brian, do you have any parental advice for us?
Parental advice? Well, yes, but how long have we got?
Time is short. We want to get on with poems, Brian.
Yeah.
So I'm going to come back to you on that maybe later. I think the way you read Kipling's If showed a wonderful sort of, mentor side to you. And I always think, Brian, that you are a sort of a sage, a possible national sage whose thoughts, I think, can guide us in these difficult times. And Brian is going to read a poem, one of his poems a little bit later, which I think is full of, I think, great sort of advice in these difficult times. I'm not sure what Brian's rule of 6 would be, but I'm sure it would be far more exciting, and possibly it would be a 6-pack of something in front of the TV, but we'll see. The next poem is a very special poem, and it's really a poem by a great friend of mine, Neil Gaiman, who is a writer and writes poetry as well. He wrote this poem for the UNHCR, the organization helping refugees, and it's a poem about how we need to be warm, and it is a fundraiser for the UNHCR for for refugees. I'm muddling my words slightly, Brian. If you could read What You Need to Be Warm by Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, I'd love to, and thank you for. I've not come across this poem before, and it is wonderful. And well, as we'll go on and find out now. So, what you need to be warm: a baked potato of a winter's night to wrap your hands around or burn your mouth. A blanket knitted by your mother's cunning fingers or your grandmother's. A smile, a touch, trust as you walk in from the snow or return to it. The tips of your ears pricked pink and frozen. The tink, tink, tink of iron radiators waking in an old house. To surface from dreams in a bed burrowed beneath blankets and comforters. The change of state from cold to warm is all that matters, and you think just one more minute snuggled here before you face the chill. Just one. Places we slept as children. They warm us in the memory. You travel to an inside from the outside, to the orange flames of the fireplace or the wood burning in the stove. Breath ice on the inside of windows, to be scratched off with a fingernail, melted with a whole hand. Frost on the ground that stays in the shadows waiting for us. Wear a scarf, wear a coat, wear a sweater, wear socks, wear thick gloves. An infant as she sleeps between us. A tumble of dogs, the kindle of cats and kittens. Come inside, you're safe now. A kettle boiling at the stove. Your family or friends are there. They smile. Cocoa or chocolate, tea or coffee, soup or toddy, what you know you need. A heat exchange, they give it to you. You take the mug and start to thaw. While outside, for some of us, the journey began as we walked away from our grandparents' houses, away from the places we knew as children. Changes of state and state and state, to stumble across the stony desert or to brave the deep waters, while food and friends, home, a bed, even a blanket become just memories. Sometimes it only takes a stranger in a dark place to hold out a badly knitted scarf, to offer a kind word, to say we have the right to be here, to make us warm in the coldest season. You have the right to be here.
Yes, what a beautiful poem, and I would love to sort of dedicate that to Priti Patel. I think that would be a suitable moment to put that in there. I love the A Tumble of Dogs, which is such a sort of cozy image. Although I say this, I actually had no longer with us, I'm afraid, but a small dog called Rosie who had the most appalling flatulence. So there's always that to contend with. But anyway, a warm, cozy image, What You Need to Be Warm by Neil Gaiman. Now, I know that we have a wonderful poem by Brian and a wonderful poem by Kushi coming up, which I'm looking forward to. But before that, what I would like to do maybe is read you just a couple of my absolute favorite poems. And this is one. Now, again, I must warn you, it's more product placement Poems to Live Your Life By, chosen and illustrated by Chris Riddell, also available. And this is one of my favourite poems, Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome-raths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the manxome foe he sought. So rested he by the Tumtum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. O frabjous day, Callooh, Callay, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome-raths outgrabe. Poems to Live Your Life By. And I'm afraid I can't get out of my mind the image of the slithy goves. I think we know who we're talking about. Particularly slithy go. It's that sort of expression they seem to have. These slithy goths. And there we go. I wonder how oven ready they in fact are. These slithy creatures. Enough of that. My goodness, there we go. I'm going to put that away. So, Brian, I would now like to invite you to read your wonderful poem, because a section in Poems to Save the World With is, in fact, subtitled Lockdown. And as you see, Brian pointed out when he very kindly tweeted about this collection that his poem was at the beginning of the lockdown section, which I enjoyed seeing. So, Brian, would you like to read Serenity Prayer?
I'd be delighted to. So, yeah, so I wrote this poem a while ago in sort of response to the news that was sort of coming through relentlessly on my radio and on my television. And, either about coronavirus, Brexit, Trump, etc. And it kind of struck me that actually life didn't always used to be like this. I sort of remember occasionally putting on my radio and the news being nothing more than a sort of minor cabinet reshuffle. And indeed, my days themselves were no more exciting than that. And so this is a poem really in praise of boring days, which I'm all in favour of, and I think need to be reintroduced soon. So it's called Serenity Prayer. By the way, I don't look like that person in Chris's drawing. Send me a slow news day, a quiet, subdued day, in which nothing much happens of note, save for the passing of time, the consumption of wine, and a rerun of Murder, She Wrote. Grant me a no news day, a spare me your views day, in which nothing much happens at all, except a few hours together, some regional weather, a day we can barely recall.
Great sentiments, Brian. I completely agree with that. I think the rule of 6 is no fewer than 6 glasses of good red wine in front of any news report containing government scientists flanking a public schoolboy who's making it up as they go along. I think that's a good rule of 6, but I'm just saying, Serenity Prayer, that made me feel serene. hearing you read that. And Brian, tell me a little bit about your recent book and your plans for future projects.
Oh gosh, yeah. So I had a book that came out in paperback at the beginning of this year. It's called Diary of a Somebody, and it's a sort of novel, but with poems woven in, about a sort of slight sort of beleaguered, hopeless poet who's called Brian. You know, any resemblance to the person you see in front of you now is entirely unintentional. So that's out, and in January next year I've got a new collection of poems coming out, and later on in the year I've got a collection, my first collection for kids, and that's a collection of football poems coming in June.
Excellent, excellent. So although, you know, the future of football is by no means certain, the future of poems about football is in safe hands, Brian.
I like to think so, very much.
I'm very much looking forward to that, and the Diary of a Somebody is a title that speaks to my heart. I do a little series of cartoons called Illustrations to Unwritten Books, where I slightly mangle up well-known titles. My first cartoon was entitled Lady Chatterley's Hoover. It goes on in that vein. So Diary of a Somebody is a lovely, lovely title. Now, Kushi, we have a beautiful poem by you, and I just want to maybe sort of turn to the poem in the book, which is wonderful. My lover eats words for supper, and as I drew this, Kushi, I just would love to get your thoughts on how this was visualized. When you wrote this, tell me a little bit about your poem and your motivations.
Oh, I wrote this poem last year. It's about the things that go unspoken in homes. And it wasn't really based on this lockdown period, but like applying it to that condition, it could also go well with that. And yeah, it first appeared in the For Young anthology. And I absolutely love how you visualize it. I think it really increased the appeal of the poem.
That's so nice of you to say that, Kushi, because I mean, I was a little bit worried because when I read your poem, I sort of got that sense of sort of, you know, things not spoken, but possibly, you know, the notion of actually being able to read the words on the page being a form of communication that's not necessarily spoken out loud. And I love the idea of eating words for supper. At the same time, I thought it would be a tender poem. It would be maybe a love poem. And I wasn't quite sure whether it was either an angry poem or a love poem. I opted for the love poem. So a romantic meal, possibly, rather than sort of, you know, a repressed meal of things not spoken.
Yeah, I love that interpretation and the illustration.
Kushi, you're saying all the right things. Thank you so much for joining us. Would you read your poem for us?
Sure. My lover eats words for supper, and there's music for dinner. Soft melody melting away at touch. Sprinkle some hellos for seasoning, a scoop of how was your day, the clink of plates, a clatter of spoons, forks, silence. Words condense into nothingness, fade away at dawn, are boiled in hot water and gobbled up with rice. We do not speak here. We have nothing to say. Love is only a metaphor. Syllables lurk inside cupboards. Silverware rattles, fills the house with noise. A distant orchestra hums.
Beautiful, beautiful. And tell me, Kushi, about your plans. Where are you at the moment? What are you doing? And what are your plans for the future?
I am currently in India doing my online classes. And I am an undergraduate at the University of British Columbia. I'm doing literature and political science. And I don't really know about my plans as of yet, but I kind of go with the flow. I keep writing and I keep doing some editorial internships and submitting to journals. So I think that will take me where I need to go.
And tell me, the University of British Columbia, is that in Vancouver?
Yes, that's in Vancouver, Canada.
That is wonderful. I just got an image of you, Kushti, I think sort of, rather cliched, maybe as part of the Canadian Mounted Police,
Yeah,
wearing one of those
that's me.
fantastic hats. Maybe that's a future sort of career in the Mounties, in beautiful British Columbia. I've got to say, Vancouver is one of my favourite sort of cities in terms of the scenery and the way that the planes, those wonderful sort of seaplanes, land in the bay as you walk around Stanley Park.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very pretty, very beautiful.
Wonderful. Tell me, are you writing poetry at the moment?
I keep writing some stuff and submitting it to places, but like I don't really have a field where I don't really have like a genre that I'm comfortable with right now. I keep experimenting with a lot.
It is interesting, the whole sort of process, isn't it, of sort of writing sort of poetry. I will ask you, Brian, in a moment about this, but I woke up the other day to find a pheasant in my garden. As it's a curious thing because I live in Brighton in the middle of the city, and looking out, there was a pheasant in my back garden, and so I was moved to write a little poem, which I will just read now. It's called Paradise. A walled enclosure of Persian kings. The pheasant, tail feathers missing, appeared in the back garden, wide-eyed in its injured robes, like an outraged potentate fleeing a palace revolution. He stepped delicately as a ballet dancer down the garden path as we watched from the kitchen window, stalked by a dusty urban fox, eyed by predatory town cats, flapped at by the impertinent pigeons. Far from the countryside shoots, the pheasant pecked at the seed beneath the bird feeder, stranded in paradise. Each morning, we check from the window to see if he's still there. He's been in the garden for about 5 days now, and I did just check before we started our event. He is still there. So he's hanging out, he's hanging in there, although there's a fox that seems to be eyeing him up for supper any day now. It's strange. It seems to be some sort of metaphor for lockdown. I'm not sure. Brian, you have got, I love your sort of, your lockdown poem, The Serenity. Do you have any other sort of poems about lockdown?
Yes, I've got quite a few of them, but I've tried to take it easy on that score in recent times because I found after a while that I was writing about nothing other than lockdown and deadly pandemics, and it probably really wasn't good for my sort of mental well-being. But yes, every now and then I still kind of cut out a new one.
It's the great sort of issue of our times, isn't it? That can't be avoided, and yet at the same time, on National Poetry Day, I think it's interesting that in a sense it's more sort of poetry is more relevant than ever because of the restrictions we all feel, and poetry in a sense is about freedom. I had a conversation with my son Jack during the lockdown period. That's the other thing about lockdown. You talk to your children far more than ever before. Jack is a student studying filmmaking. He was very, very angry about a number of issues: Black Lives Matter, the presidency of Donald Trump, the international capitalist system. You know, it all made Jack furious, the whole thing. And he said, "Dad, I feel like getting out there and sort of breaking windows and setting fire to things." And I said, "Jack, you mustn't do that." And so I wrote this poem, which is called This is an Incitement. And it's for my son, Jack. It's a plea not to go out and wreck things, but maybe try a different course. It's also dedicated to Rupert Murdoch. This is an incitement. Don't settle into inertia as the ash falls on your head and shoulders, soft and ankle deep at your feet. Take up your pens and brushes. and make art. The ancient dragons of greed, coiled tight around their hoards, don't understand art. But the snake oil minions who whisper in their ears as they sleep, they fear it. Art can capture the souls they bought and paid for. If you want to slay dragons, make art. I think that's got a certain look that Rupert Murdoch seems to have. You know, the lizard eyes, possibly the eyebrows. Certainly, that's got a certain feel. It felt very satisfying to draw that. I hope Jack takes that into account. He's been making some films for me during lockdown, which has been very useful. But in a very curious way, you know, we are all sort of reduced now to this sort of Zoom identity, aren't we? Where we look at each other at a distance in our settings. Kushti, describe to me exactly where you are and what I can see behind you.
Oh, I am in the living room. This is my house. I live in New Delhi, India. And yeah, there's a balcony there. There are a lot of plants. My mom does a lot of gardening. My room is right there.
And more important than all that, Kushi, what do you have on your wall that I can see sort of behind you?
Oh, these are some frames that my brother painted for his school project, and my mom stuck them up there because they look pretty.
So those are painted frames.
Yeah.
But they don't have anything in them.
Yeah, we need to put pictures in them.
No. Kushi, what you need to do is write a poem about that. Write a poem about a beautiful, beautiful frame, decorated, beautiful frame that doesn't in fact contain a picture. What is that framing? He said in a portentous way. Kushi's looking at me with that look of someone who's in a tutorial and has just been put on the spot. You know, one of those
sort of concept.
Brian, what would you put in one of Kushti's frames?
Oh, I quite like the idea of them being left empty somehow as some sort of grand metaphor for the for lockdown.
Titles are great, aren't they? The grand metaphor. So, Kushi, we've come up with the title for your next poetry collection. It's the grand metaphor within a frame with nothing in it. It's very exciting, Kushi. If I may, I would like to send you something that might fit one of your frames.
Oh wow, I love that.
Fantastic. We shall do that. I think it should be the illustration I did to your beautiful poem that might fit within the frame.
That's amazing. Yeah, that will look really, really good here.
Wonderful. Now, Brian, I want to again sort of invite you to sort of share some of your sort of wisdom with us. What did you, and this is sort of straying from the point, but it is National Poetry Day. What would be your sort of poetic response to the extraordinary debate that we saw take place yesterday during the sort of presidential election?
My poet, do you want me to give you a poem live on air?
Well, you could do if you're brave enough. That would be very exciting. Or you could just sort of give your opinion on what we witnessed.
Well, I think if I were to write a poem about it, it would be. I think I'd probably like to play with the visual form quite a lot, so that you had sort of all the words of it sort of overlapping each other and intermingling, so it just became a garbled, incoherent mess.
I like that, Brian. That's a sort of Donald Trump word cloud, I think they call it, don't they?
That's right. Although cloud does seem too poetic for such a thing.
Yes, I mean, you know, have you sort of seen that rather amusing book called the Wonderful Poetry of Donald Trump?
I have, yes. He has a way. He certainly has a way of talking that is that does have a slightly kind of mesmeric, bizarrely poetic quality. You know, it is like nobody else, really.
That's true. I mean, what in his sort of sound sort of cloud, I sort of give me some words. I'm thinking fake news would be big.
Yeah, great would be good.
Great. I think you need to elongate that. It's great. The greatest. The greatest ever. And then as he talks, he goes a little quiet, doesn't he, as he emphasizes greater fake news. He's got that urgency when he's being very, very serious.
Yeah, you need to add at least 3 exclamation marks on the end of most of those words too.
The exclamation mark could be the greatest gift, couldn't it?
Mm.
Is there such a thing as a sort of slightly wheezy sort of exclamation mark? Let's see what it is. So I think I think now it is appropriate to, because we've witnessed the great presidential debate that went on, which was a wonderful sort of debate. I think we should just maybe countermand that with, you know, the has-been president who isn't half as great as the great Donald Trump. So let's have those words by someone who's not Donald. The Gettysburg Address. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we're engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here, dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honoured dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Abraham Lincoln. Yes, so you see, you know, poems come in many forms, don't they? Sometimes, you know, great political sort of speeches can become sort of poetic, I feel. Khushi, give me your view of things in India at the moment.
Things in India. Well, there have been a lot of things happening, I mean, politically. I mean, I'm not really very updated on everything, but I feel like there's been a lot of chaos and a lot of, as you know, India has a lot of poverty, so there's been a lot of chaos during the lockdown period, and there's been crimes increasing. So
I've got to say, Khushi, that it's a very interesting sort of time, isn't it? And we are sort of, I can't believe the sort of time is racing past, but I want to say, Kushi, that you writing poetry is a wonderful thing. That whilst you study, whilst you do other things, you continue to sort of be sort of creative, and I really look forward to reading your future work, whatever that may be. I think maybe a comic ballad about the Canadian Mounted Police could be the next thing. I'm not sure, but I admire your creativity, and I just wanted to share maybe this a poem that I wrote for my son Will, which was 166. Which was in response, I think. And I'm going to ask Kushi, how old are you?
I'm 18, almost 19.
Almost 19, my goodness. My son is a little bit older than you, but I wrote this very much for the younger generation as someone who is rather sort of, getting on in years. Brian is a young strip of a thing compared to me. I'm graying and aging almost in dog years, Brian, as we speak. But this is a poem I wrote when one evening in May, I think, there was a beautiful full moon, and I went down and I sat and just looked at the full moon. And the next morning I wrote this poem for my son, William, who's a little bit older than you, Kushi. It's called Lockdown. I sat beneath the May moon last night and missed my life, in silver and shadow, with a distant trundling of trains going nowhere. There was a muted tranquility in sitting in the midnight garden, my lockdown house silent and sleeping behind me. Then you came down the stairs, and noticing the open door, stepped out to join me in the moonlight. "Oh, it's you, Dad," you said, smiling. And suddenly I was falling away into empty darkness, mourning the life you were missing so bravely. So I want to say, Kushi, I hope that things get back to normal, you get back to your studies in beautiful Vancouver before too long. Brian, I hope that your party going in Manhattan isn't inconvenienced too much. That you get to sort of, go to those midnight raves more often than you're able to now.
Thank you. Thank you.
I thank you, both of you, so much for joining me, reading the poem so beautifully. I think coming together through poetry is a lovely thing. Poems to Save the World With is an ambitious title for any book. I hope that you might find some things in here to enjoy. And on all I would like to say now is to thank all of you for tuning in, and to wish you all a very, very happy National Poetry Day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.